Hi guys, welcome to Midnight Anime Library.
Xia Wen transmigrated to the world of One Piece and awakened the Multiverse Jar System. He can get the same thing as long as he sells a jar. Furthermore, selling a certain quantity will also grant you exclusive jars and other benefits such as shop owner privileges. Rumble Fruit plus Unthinkable / equals Thor Nami. 8 Gates plus 6 Treasures Immortal Thief equals 1 Punch Kaido. Demon God Manifestation Essence of the Demon, plus Heart Cleansing Mantra, equals Absolute Zero Kuzan. When Shirahoshi encountered the shrinking lamp, she shrunk to a normal human size. When Shanks ate a Senzu Bean, he grew a new arm.
When Akainu drew his Ryuuka sword, Jakka, it ignited the sea.
When Crocodile sat atop the creation engine, contemplating the future. When Luffy opened the One Piece manga, he learned about the future developments. Everyone was suddenly awakened to find that the sea had become completely unfamiliar. Navy headquarters, all rear admirals and above, get the chance to open cans. The 4 emperors temporarily put aside their grudges and reached a consensus: let's get our hands on the jar first. The 5 elders held an emergency meeting: we must stop Xia Wen from selling the cans.
We must maintain world stability.
When him awoke from his slumber and learned that there were several Nika devil fruit users in the ocean, he felt as if the sky had fallen. The strongmen who emerged from the jar shop all headed towards the sea, solely to spread the word about the jar shop's greatness. Thus, a new legend was born on the high seas: better to offend the 4 emperors than the jar merchant.
Now, it's the era of big can opening.
Starting with a jar, Shanks got his arm back and Akainu set the sea on fire. One Piece Part 1 Chapter 1, a shop that only sells jars. This is the jar collection point.
Sign in and receive 100 million jars for free. Year 1519 of the sea calendar. Kokoyashi village in autumn was enveloped in a joyful atmosphere of harvest.
Having been discovered stealing treasure, Nami dragged her exhausted body and fled back to the village in a sorry state. Damn it, they looked so rich, but there were only 100,000 berries on their ship. The thought of almost failing and only earning so little made Nami grit her teeth. However, she was now a little closer to her goal of saving 100 million berries to redeem the village.
Nojiko, she should be in the Tangerine Grove now, right?
Nami was just about to go see her sister. Then she heard a commotion from ahead. Several familiar villagers walked out of a shop, complaining incessantly, "What a ripoff!
A broken jar costs 100,000 berries?
Are your jars made of gold or silver?
They even said you could get anything from them, obviously a scam." Their words piqued Nami's curiosity. Jars for 100,000 berries? A scammer?
After the villagers left, Nami cautiously peeked out and looked at the shop that had appeared in the village at some unknown time. The shop sign read, "Miracle of Destiny."
Miracle of Destiny? Nami whispered, unconsciously touching her money pouch.
As if drawn by something, she inexplicably stepped into the shop. Xia Wen quietly watched the first group of guests leave, offering no explanation or retention. He had just transmigrated to this world known as Pirate King, Bloodline King, and Daddy King, and awakened the myriad world's jar system. In this shop gifted by the system, he could receive a certain number of jars every day. The system said that once he sold the initial 10 jars, he would leave the novice period.
The daily limit on jars sold would greatly increase, and formal period benefits would also unlock.
Within the shop, he would not suffer any harm or control. He could also autonomously activate the shop owner's privilege, becoming invincible and suppressing enemies directly.
The shop itself also had an indestructible enchantment.
Xia Wen was quite satisfied with this point.
A system that can guarantee the host's safety is a good system.
The core of the myriad world's jar system was only one: to sell jars.
Sell more jars. No matter what the guest opened, he would obtain the same item.
If someone opened a devil fruit, he would gain the corresponding ability, and it wouldn't be restrained by sea stone. In short, he would take all the benefits and discard the drawbacks. As long as enough jars were sold. He could also become powerful quickly, just like a certain hard-working king.
Unreasonably fast.
According to the system's introduction, after he sold a certain number of jars.
More advanced jars and new shops would also unlock. But the biggest problem now was, the jars were too expensive.
The first group of guests at the shop just now were directly deterred by the high price.
System, your price is too high, can't you really change it? Xia Wen asked helplessly in his mind.
100,000 berries, in the timeline a year before protagonist Luffy set sail.
It was a very large sum of money. Especially for Kokoyashi village, a village exploited by the Arlong pirates, this was even more true.
After paying their monthly exorbitant protection fees, the villagers could barely maintain their livelihoods. Where would they have spare money to buy a jar whose authenticity was unknown? Unfortunately, after introducing the basic functions in shop upgrade conditions, the system directly disappeared, leaving only a message that the jar price could not be changed, otherwise the sold jars would be confiscated. This made Xia Wen's idea of quickly becoming stronger fall through.
But cat burglar Nami should be very rich at this time, right?
However, prying berries out of her hands was not a simple matter.
It would require some rhetoric and inducement.
Xia Wen thought to himself, a plan already forming in his mind.
Just then, footsteps sounded.
A guest had arrived. After Nami entered the shop, her gaze quickly swept around. The interior of the shop was simply arranged, the only
display was 10 plain-looking clay jars on the table.
Her gaze finally settled on the young man resting in the armchair. The young man looked around 20 years old, dressed cleanly, with a lazy expression.
What surprised Nami most was not his incredibly handsome appearance, but his demeanor.
The young man seemed out of place with the entire world, possessing a faint sense of detachment.
He was definitely not from Kokoyashi village. She hadn't even seen anyone with the same temperament as this young man during all her years adventuring in the East Blue.
A sense of vigilance immediately arose in Nami's heart.
After the Arlong pirates made Kokoyashi village their base, the villagers' movements were strictly restricted, and even fishing boats were destroyed. How did this strange shop owner get in and open such a shop? Seen enough?
Xia Wen opened his eyes, his tone flat. This shop only sells jars, 1 jar for 100,000 berries. At this point, Nami, with a skeptical mindset, carefully examined the 10 jars on the table. They were ordinary, without any special features. This broken jar actually dared to demand 100,000 berries. This was faster than robbery. Thinking this, Nami, who had already determined the shop owner was a scammer.
Her eyes curved into crescent moons, revealing her white teeth.
She stepped forward, showing her signature sweet smile. She planned to test the shop owner's intentions, to see why these jars were so valuable. If she could learn his trickery, the remaining 10 million berries could be saved up very quickly. For example, she could go to other places in the East Blue to sell tangerines worth 100,000 berries.
But before Nami could speak,
Xia Wen preempted her. This shop does not accept bargaining. He paused, then delivered his prepared lines, 100,000 berries for 1 jar.
It might open up treasure that makes you rich overnight, or it might open up worthless trash.
His gaze met Nami's, his voice lowering a few octaves. It might also be
something that changes your destiny. There's nothing it can't open, only what you can't imagine. Destiny? Nami almost laughed out loud.
Destiny can't make me spend 100,000 berries.
She had an innate resistance to spending money.
If these jars could truly open different things as the other party claimed, then the so-called treasure must be artificially controlled. 100,000 berries a try, who knows how many she'd have to open to get the so-called treasure. She still had to save money to redeem the village. Seeing Nami seemed about to back out, Xia Wen, knowing her money-grubbing nature, decided to add fuel to the fire. The jars in my shop contain the miracle of destiny that can change one's fate. For example, opening up gold enough to buy an entire village, or perhaps. Xia Wen deliberately paused, observing Nami's reaction, gaining power sufficient to defeat a powerful enemy. Nami trembled, her secret touched, the smile on her face became strained. She subconsciously clutched her money pouch.
What did the shop owner just say? Defeat a powerful enemy. It was just a jar, how could it enable her to defeat a powerful enemy?
She had personally witnessed Arlong's terror. He could even crush cannonballs with his bare hands, bite through iron swords, and flip houses. He was a complete monster.
Nami desperately wanted to turn and leave this scammer shop owner. But her feet seemed rooted to the spot, unable to move.
Xia Wen calmly pointed to the 10 jars on the table.
So, would you like to try once, and open a jar? Chapter 2. Nami opens the can, and kills in one shot. Nami's gaze wavered between the jars and the money bag.
Reason told her this was definitely a scam.
But what if? What if it really could open up enough power to let her defeat Arlong? Wouldn't 7 years of torment finally end?
But 100,000 berries was too expensive. She had just barely managed to earn over 100,000 berries today. This was the life-saving money to rescue her village. How could she casually spend such a large sum?
To gamble on a possibility?
If she lost the gamble, it would mean all her efforts during this time would be in vain. Just as Nami was hesitating, Xia Wen calmly added, "Only 10 jars are left today, sales will stop once they're gone. I also don't permanently reside in this village, so opportunities to change your fate aren't available every day."
These words became the last straw that broke the camel's back.
Nami remembered her fear and hatred for Arlong, and her longing for freedom. And her childhood dream to draw a map of the entire world. If she didn't have enough power, even if she saved up 100 million berries to redeem her village in freedom,
she wouldn't be able to go out to sea and complete the map, would she?
Nami bit her lip tightly, that faint glimmer of hope and longing outweighed her suspicion of a scam.
With a smack,
she tremblingly took 100,000 berries from her bag and slammed them onto the counter. With a hint of a sob and stubbornness, she shouted, "All right.
I'll open one jar."
At this moment, Nami's heart was bleeding, constantly regretting why she had been so impulsive. Why she had spent 100,000 berries to buy a broken jar.
Wouldn't it have been better to just honestly save up 100 million berries and redeem the village?
The fish had taken the bait. Xia Wen's lips curved slightly as he made a welcoming gesture. Nami forced herself not to watch the shop owner pocket the 100,000 berries. She carefully examined the 10 identical jars. Ultimately, she chose the third jar from the left. She cautiously picked up the jar and found that it felt much lighter than she had imagined.
Can these jars really produce anything? Nami expressed her doubt.
Putting aside the so-called power. Even if it produced enough gold to buy the village, it wouldn't weigh so little, would it? Could it be that this jar doesn't produce direct treasure, but rather, a treasure map?
Nami's eyes suddenly turned into the shape
of berries. If that were the case,
she wouldn't be unable to accept it.
Xia Wen chuckled, "Of course, the jars in my shop can produce anything. Whether it's the legendary devil fruit, or methods for cultivating haki, or even great swords, means to control sea kings, and so on, the jars have it all.
Of course, opening jars is all about luck.
As for the fact that the jars could also produce skills or items from other worlds, there was no need to tell Nami that." A trace of confusion flashed in Nami's eyes. She had heard of devil fruit. It was said to be something that could grant people strange abilities.
But eating it would make one a hammer, and it was very expensive. But what was haki?
It could actually be mentioned in the same breath as a legendary item like the devil fruit.
Since these jars are so good, shop owner, why are you selling them? Nami couldn't help but ask, looking at the shop owner's calm expression.
If it were her, she would never bring out such good things. Especially when it was only priced at 100,000 berries.
It should be at least 1 million, no.
It should be 10 million berries.
Because it's interesting enough.
Xia Wen chuckled, "Anyone can buy jars in my shop. Whether it's a pirate, a marine, a revolutionary army member, or even an ordinary person without any special skills. I hope to see people who have bought jars in my shop. After they become powerhouses on the sea, more people will come to me, drawn by their reputation, to buy jars." Xia Wen's goal had always been just one.
Sell jars. Sell more jars.
Let most of the famous characters in Pirate King come and buy his jars.
What kind of strange dream was this? Nami felt the shop owner was fooling her.
Never mind, she should focus on her own jar.
Shop owner, how do I open this jar?
Just smash it. Xia Wen reminded her.
Nami took a deep breath, picked up the jar, and slammed it down.
And Xia Wen also curiously looked at the open jar.
As the first customer to buy a jar in the shop, he was very curious about what kind of item Nami would get. Clang!
A bright, dazzling golden light cluster flew out and exploded with a roar inside the shop. As the light gradually faded,
Nami held her breath and looked into the broken jar.
She saw a strange, golden yellow object quietly lying there, its surface covered with lightning-like patterns, twisted into a spiral shape.
This is...
Nami picked up the strangely shaped object in confusion. It felt cold to the touch and had a slight tingling sensation. It wasn't gold, nor did it look like a powerful weapon.
Her inner expectation was instantly enveloped by immense disappointment. Is that all? This shop owner was indeed a fraud. What was she even expecting?
Logia rumble fruit, after consumption, grants the ability to transform into lightning, possessing immense destructive power. Can instantly move short distances and fly in the form and speed of lightning, can enhance observation haki, allowing for wide-range eavesdropping.
Can create lightning clones, lightning beasts, and can restart one's heart by electrocuting it. Note, this is the power of a god. Ding!
Customer has opened a Logia rumble fruit. Congratulations to the host for acquiring the same ability.
It was the rumble fruit.
Looking at the system's introduction, Xia Wen's eye twitched, feeling like he, a non-lucky person, had been critically hit by a lucky person who got an instant kill. Although in the original work, the battle record of this devil fruit's owner was quite disappointing.
But it couldn't be denied that it was one of the top Logia devil fruits.
In fact, in Xia Wen's mind, the Logia prefix could be removed.
But at this point in time, hasn't the rumble fruit already been eaten by Eneru?
Could it be that jars can also produce devil fruits that already have owners?
What if someone opened a Nika fruit later? Xia Wen's expression was strange. If 7 or 8 Nika devil fruit.
Users suddenly appeared on the sea, a bunch of rubber men jumping around. The scene was too beautiful. Xia Wen didn't dare to imagine further. Nami, who had never seen a devil fruit, couldn't be happy at the moment. She tried hard to open her eyes wide, letting tears well up, and said pitifully and innocently, "Handsome and kind shop owner, can I return this and get my 100,000 berries back?"
"Oh? Are you sure?" Xia Wen said calmly, "Miss, your luck is enough to make anyone on the sea jealous.
What you opened is not trash, but a devil fruit.
And it's the Logia rumble fruit. Eat it, and you will have the power to transform into lightning.
In principle, once a jar is sold, it cannot be returned or exchanged, but this time,
I am willing to make an exception for it."
After speaking, Xia Wen deliberately took out the 100,000 berries, looking as if he intended to reclaim the devil fruit.
A devil fruit? Transform into lightning?
Nami was stunned, seeing the shop owner actually reach out his hand. She immediately hugged the devil fruit and retreated a few steps with a thump, thump, thump. She didn't know how powerful this rumble fruit was, but she definitely wasn't stupid. Since this mysterious shop owner wanted to reclaim it,
it meant this devil fruit was definitely extremely valuable. Had she gambled correctly this time? Then I'm not returning it.
Nami hugged the devil fruit tightly, a joyful smile finally appearing on her face.
Chapter 3 Rumble Fruit. Shop upgrade requirements. I never thought I'd one day become a legendary devil fruit user.
Nami hugged the devil fruit tightly, her eyes gleaming. She seemed to already see herself commanding the winds and rains, her name famous across the seas, and the corners of her mouth unconsciously turned up. Xia Wen glanced at the broken jars on the floor and lightly snapped his fingers.
Snap! The remnants of the jars continuously writhed, eventually merging into the shop's floor. This left Nami, startled by the snapping sound, wide-eyed. What kind of ability was this, like directly eating the jars? This shop owner, he wouldn't also feed people directly to the shop, would he? Thinking of this, Nami involuntarily shivered.
Her awe for the mysterious shop owner deepened once more. She should have thought of it earlier. This shop owner could casually produce a devil fruit and set the jars at 100,000 berries each. It showed that he himself was a powerful devil fruit user. The slight arrogance Nami had just felt completely vanished.
Logia type, rumble fruit.
Xia Wen introduced in a calm tone, depending on personal development, different abilities can be honed.
But you will definitely possess elementalization, as well as the power to generate electricity, short-distance teleportation, and unleash lightning strikes.
He looked up at Nami, who was showing shock and unconsciously opening her mouth.
Now, you can eat it. This is your miracle of destiny.
However, there was one thing Xia Wen didn't mention. That is, devil fruit are extremely unpalatable. And a devil fruit user only needs to eat one bite to gain power. There's no need to eat the whole thing. This was not out of malice or revenge for Nami's earlier quiet accusation that he was a liar. Rather, if a devil fruit user didn't experience this, it wouldn't be authentic.
Miracle of destiny. Nami was startled, remembering the sign outside the shop. If she ate this rumble fruit, she should be able to fight Arlong, right? At least, she would have the capital to resist. This was the power to save the village. Nami took a deep breath, looked at the uniquely shaped devil fruit in her hand, and took a bite directly. Then, predictably, Nami's delicate, undeveloped features all scrunched up. Tears welled in the corners of her eyes. Her stomach churned, her face contorted, and she almost vomited. Disgusting. So disgusting. It was a legendary devil fruit, so why was it so unpalatable? But then she remembered that this was the miracle she had opened with 100,000 berries. It was the power she would use to save her village and fight Arlong. Nami endured it, swallowing the devil fruit in her mouth. Finally, she closed her eyes and quickly swallowed the rest of the devil fruit in a few bites. She went all out. Boom! The moment Nami ate the rumble fruit. Despite it being a clear day in Kokoyashi village, a real bolt of lightning streaked across the sky. Thunder roared. Who? Nami, who had just escaped a taste bud hell, felt an unprecedented power emerge within her body. That power made her body tingle. She subconsciously pointed her right index finger at the floor. Sizzle! A small blue flash of lightning erupted from her fingertip, striking the shop's floor. Nami was stunned. She stared blankly at her hands, at the constantly flickering and leaping electric arcs at her fingertips. Her neck stiffly raised, she looked at the shop owner, whose expression was normal, with only a slight smile on his lips. At this moment, all suspicion in Nami's eyes vanished, replaced by genuine shock and ecstasy. She really had only spent 100,000 berries to buy a devil fruit. The shop owner hadn't lied to her, these jars really could yield good things. Feeling the terrifying power within her, which she could control with ease. For the first time in 7 years, Nami shed tears filled with hope, not despair and pain. The village was saved, everyone was saved. It seems the guest is very satisfied with this purchase experience. Xia Wen said at the opportune moment, "You are the luckiest buyer I have ever seen. How about it? Do you want to buy some more jars?" If he could sell 10 jars today, it would be best to get out of the beginner phase. Nami. More money? Nami's expression was conflicted. Although she had become a devil fruit user, she wasn't a hot-blooded idiot who would immediately seek revenge on Arlong. She planned to first hide her strength and slowly develop her devil fruit ability. Then, she would formulate a meticulous plan before going to deal with the Arlong pirates. She absolutely had to eliminate the village's scourge once and for all, leaving no future troubles. So, opening more jars was necessary. No matter how much it pained her, she couldn't hesitate. This was money to save the village, she couldn't save it. I only have tens of thousands of berries left on me. Shop owner, could you please hold the jars for me? I'll come back with the money, and I'll definitely buy them. I want all 9 remaining jars. Nami said, feeling embarrassed. And she also had another idea in her heart. That was whether she could buy a few jars for Nojiko as well, to let her sister also gain powerful abilities. That way, she could feel more at ease when she left Kokoyashi village in the future. Of course, that's your freedom. Xia Wen smiled faintly. However, I won't specifically reserve these jars for you. If a new guest comes to the door, I will still do business. Upon hearing this, Nami immediately became anxious. If such magical jars were discovered by the fishmen of the Arlong pirates, leading to Arlong also buying jars to become stronger, then she would be in danger. After all, compared to her alone, the one in charge of the Arlong pirates definitely wouldn't lack berries. Shop owner, can the Marine and the Arlong pirates also buy jars? They are executioners who exploit and oppress the village. As if seeing through her anxiety, Xia Wen calmly added, I said before, I am only responsible for selling jars. As for who the customer is or what they have done, it has nothing to do with me. Moreover, not everyone has the luck you do, guest, as these are just ordinary jars. Everyone can only purchase 10 jars of the same quality within a week. This was a rule set by the system, designed to prevent major powers from completely monopolizing them. Same quality? Nami's spirit jolted. From the shop owner's words, did it mean there were even better jars? Then, shop owner, how many berries does it cost to buy higher grade jars? You don't have permission to buy high grade jars yet. Xia Wen calmly shook his head. However, the truth was, he hadn't unlocked high grade jars yet. The system required that at least 10 relatively famous characters had to make purchases in the shop to unlock higher grade jars. Relatively famous meant characters who appeared and showed up a certain number of times in the original story, whose versions would be strengthened with updates, and who had interactions with the main characters. Of course, Nami, as a member of the main characters, definitely counted as one slot. Besides that, if he cumulatively sold 100 ordinary jars, he could unlock new shops in other locations. As the shop owner, he could instantly move between two shops, allowing him to sell jars in other places. This made Xia Wen, who initially thought he could only stay in the East Blue, breathe a sigh of relief. Compared to Paradise, first half of the Grand Line, and the New World, the Four Seas were still too backward. Knowing that even if Arlong had money, he could only buy 10 jars in the short term, Nami barely breathed a sigh of relief. She had to possess the power to defeat the Arlong pirates within a week. Xia Wen watched Nami leave to get money. He began experimenting with his new abilities in the empty shop. After all, the shop had an indestructible characteristic. He could do whatever he wanted. As the sounds of a sizzle, crack, boom, thunder continuously exploded. Xia Wen, who had finally figured out his limits, dispelled his elementalization. It seems the rumble fruit ability I obtained also needs development. But the good news was, the system told him that after acquiring the second shop, he would have his own exclusive jars. And they would be better than the jars sold in the shop, and more likely to yield good items. At this moment, a marine officer with a cigarette in his mouth walked by, looking suspiciously at the sky, then at the shop from which thunderous sounds occasionally emanated. Strange, there's no thunder, is there? What's that noise in that house? He narrowed his eyes, suddenly noticing the shop he had never seen before. When did this shop appear? Chapter 4 Forced Purchase? Nami's second can opening. Has this new shop paid its taxes? Has it paid protection fees? Illegal operations are under his jurisdiction. As Captain Nozumi's adjutant in Marine Branch 16, he immediately perked up, his face full of excitement. These commoners should just obey his commands. Thinking this, the marine officer swaggered into the shop. The first thing he saw was a black-haired young man leisurely drinking tea inside the shop. Xia Wen looked up at the uniformed marine in front of him, and calmly put down his teacup. This shop only sells jars, 100,000 berries each, first come, first served. Ha! The marine officer pointed disbelievingly at the broken pottery jars, his voice suddenly rising. These pieces of trash, you're actually selling them for 100,000 berries? If these jars were given to him for free, he'd still complain about them taking up space. Only a fool would buy them. Feeling that he had been made a fool of, the marine officer's face darkened, and he immediately threw several accusations. I see you're clearly committing fraud. An illegal operation, tax evasion.
Before I came in, I also heard strange noises coming from your shop. I suspect you're harboring and colluding with pirates.
But
he changed his tone, revealing a greedy expression. If you are willing to pay a 100,000 berries deposit, I can arrange to spare you from jail. Having been with Captain Nezumi for so long, extortion had become ingrained in his soul.
Xia Wen raised an eyebrow. Someone was actually trying to extort him?
But, to be fair, this was indeed a method.
System. Can I force people to buy, directly dragging them into the shop to consume?
Or cripple customers, so they have to pay for jars to save their lives?
Xia Wen asked in his mind.
It seemed the system was surprised by his brilliant wisdom, as its response was very quick this time.
Ding. Warning, both parties in the jar transaction must be acting under normal, conscious will. It is forbidden to force or mentally control others into buying jars.
If such behavior occurs, the sold jars will be confiscated. Seeing that the system had blocked this path, Xia Wen could only regretfully abandon his bold idea, intentionally provoke a guest, then force them to attack.
After activating the shop owner's invincible privilege, suppress all enemies.
The only downside was that he would become a wanted criminal, with a hefty bounty on his head. At this moment, the marine officer looked at the jars on the table, finding them increasingly displeasing.
This unfamiliar shop owner, didn't he say he sold jars?
Then he would smash all these jars.
He'd see if this shop owner could still maintain that irritating composure and calm. He had a well-established method for dealing with these commoners. Just threaten and intimidate them, and it was guaranteed they would obediently pay.
Thinking this, the marine officer suddenly struck out, punching hard at the pottery jar closest to him. But the anticipated scenario, where the jar would be easily shattered, and the shop owner would show a pained, terrified expression, begging for mercy, did not occur. Instead, his fist felt like it had hit a giant rock.
Ah! My hand! Why are these jars so hard?
The marine officer awkwardly clutched his slightly swollen right hand. Seeing that the shop owner still looked calm and unbothered,
he immediately felt humiliated and a surge of anger within him.
Gritting his teeth, his eyes flashed with menace, and he viciously swept his leg at the table leg in front of him. Since those jars were strange, he would just
kick over the table. Crack!
A clear sound of bone breaking was particularly jarring in the silent shop.
The marine officer instantly froze in place.
His shin was broken.
What was this table made of, to be so sturdy?
Xia Wen glanced at the marine, who was sweating from pain on his forehead, and kindly reminded him, "Are you all right, guest?
Why don't you open a jar?
Whether it's a spray that directly heals injuries, or food that can accelerate body recovery when eaten.
There's nothing you can't imagine, nothing that can't be opened.
A jar only costs 100,000 berries. The shop had an indestructible characteristic, which naturally included the items within the shop itself. As for the jars, they simply couldn't be opened before a transaction.
Even at this point, the other party was still promoting his broken jars.
The marine officer, who had failed to establish his authority and was injured, really wanted to pull out his flintlock pistol to make this shop owner, who had remained calm and even too lazy to stand up, understand who was the king. But then he thought of all the strange things that had just happened.
And the shop owner's face, which was completely different from anyone in Kokoyashi village.
Feeling that he had hit a wall, the marine officer immediately felt a desire to retreat. This shop owner was very likely a newcomer who had only recently arrived.
He must go back and tell the captain.
Humph. No one will ever buy your jars from this shady shop. After leaving a harsh remark, the marine officer scurried out of the shop, limping. Xia Wen watched the marine limp away, leaning against the wall, his gaze profound. I hope you can bring enough change. Having just taken enough berries from her money box, Nami rushed over impatiently.
She was trying to prevent anyone from stealing the jars.
She happened to see a marine limping out of the jar shop. Seeing the marine officer glance at her, then flee in a hurry,
Nami's heart tightened, feeling a sense of unease. That magical jar shop might be exposed. Tomorrow, I must bring Nojiko to buy jars. To ensure that those magical jars that could change destiny wouldn't fall into the hands of the hateful Marines and the Arlong pirates. Now, she was going to open many. As soon as she entered the shop, Nami's gaze fixed on the 9 pottery jars on the table. Her eyes almost turned into the shape of berries. If she could open a treasure map, or another devil fruit, that would be great. She could even get one for Nojiko. Shop owner, I'm here to open jars again. Xia Wen calmly glanced at Nami, who had already started picking jars but found she couldn't move them at all. Pay first, then open jars. Oh. Even though it was her second visit. Nami still had a pained expression, and with great reluctance, she took out 900,000 berries and placed them on the counter. However, some of the banknotes were stained with blood for some reason. Before Xia Wen could collect the money, Nami suddenly reached out and quickly retrieved the bloody berries. She nonchalantly replaced them with clean banknotes. Haha, these berries accidentally got some ketchup on them just now. Open the jars, open the jars. Saying that, Nami punched the jar on the very edge. Smash! The jar shattered with a sound. A smooth, round fruit with an orange-red gradient rolled out from inside. This. I opened another devil fruit? Nami froze, looking at her hands in disbelief. Opening 2 legendary devil fruits in a row. When did her luck get so good? Or was it that the most worthless things in the mysterious shop owner's hands were all devil fruits? Xia Wen looked at the very familiar fruit on the table, falling into silence for a moment. Sunset fruit, a common wild fruit from a certain world. Eating it can restore a small amount of health. Its taste is similar to an apple. Note, Genshin, start. Chapter 5 The Law of Conservation of Osmosis. Hahaha. This is great. Now I can also become a legendary devil fruit user. Xia Wen gently shook his head, interrupting Nami's excited fantasy as she hugged the sunset fruit and kissed it. I'm afraid this isn't a devil fruit. Ha! Hearing the shop owner's words, the smile on Nami's face instantly froze, and her upturned lips slowly drooped. It's not a devil fruit? This is a fruit called the sunset fruit. It restores a small amount of vitality upon consumption, so it's a fruit that can heal injuries. Its taste is similar to an apple. Oh, Nami's expression immediately turned incredibly disappointed, so it's just an ordinary fruit. Although the shop owner just said that this sunset fruit could restore minor injuries, she, who had eaten the rumble fruit, could become an elemental, immune to all attacks. If it weren't for the fact that the devil fruit still needed development, and she temporarily hadn't created any powerful skills, she could have fought Arlong to a standstill with her invincible elementalization. This can opening was a loss. But it didn't matter. She hadn't finished opening her jars yet. Looking at the remaining 8 jars, Nami first clasped her hands together and silently prayed for herself. Then she decisively smashed 2 of them consecutively. Smash! From the broken jars burst a white orb of light in a swimsuit? Nami's face darkened as she disdainfully picked up the excessively revealing, shameless blue swimsuit with 2 fingers. Xia Wen didn't even need to introduce it. Nami pouted, this swimsuit is too revealing, isn't it? I'll never wear something like this in my life. She usually wore long dresses, or long pants and long sleeves. However, to avoid waste, Nami, despite her words, was honest with her body and put it into her specially prepared backpack. This thing only deserved to be on the same table as that sunset fruit. Xia Wen. Girl, are you sure? Nami's bikini, blue style, a classic among classics, paired with a white beach skirt. Exuding elegant temperament. Note, don't think about it, it's not original, it's just one of the ones the original owner accidentally bought a little too many of. At this moment, Nami carefully tapped the white orb of light floating in front of her. She looked at the shop owner curiously. Shop owner, what is this white orb of light for? Basic combat mastery, the most basic combat mastery. After fusion, you can acquire the combat skills and experience that a normal marine would gain after 2.5 years of practice in a normal state. Note, this is a marine recruit's most valuable treasure.
Xia Wen organized his words, this is basic combat mastery. After fusion, it can give you the combat skills of a regular marine who has practiced for over 2 years. The method of use is very simple, just press the orb of light against your chest to absorb and fuse it.
Combat mastery?
Nami's eyes lit up, she was currently lacking such means to increase her combat power. Although this orb of light only contained basic combat skills, it was better than her knowing nothing in close combat. After all, after she set sail in the future, it would be impossible for her to expose her identity as a devil fruit user every time.
It was too easy to become a target. It was more convenient to solve some minor troubles with physical techniques. Nami eagerly pressed the white orb of light against her chest, as instructed by the shop owner.
Watching the orb gradually merge into her body.
In an instant,
Nami felt that her mind had gained many memories and experiences related to close-quarters combat.
When the absorption was complete, Nami surprisingly looked down and touched her taut waistline.
She clearly felt that her physical fitness seemed to have improved significantly.
She felt more powerful. Absorbing that orb of light also came with the benefit of physical training? These jars were too amazing. Nami said joyfully, "Shop owner, what was that just now?" Xia Wen nodded gently, "Just as you thought."
This combat mastery, of course, includes an improvement in physical fitness. In fact, even he was somewhat surprised that the items given by the jars were so good. When absorbing skill or experience-type orbs of light, even the physical fitness improvements generated during the training process were copied over intact. The value of this orb of light was much higher than he had initially expected.
Could Nami's luck really be so heaven-defying? To this, Xia Wen could only say, "Well done." Anyway, no matter what the other party got, he could get it 1-to-1.
Xia Wen wished that the guests who came to buy jars would always strike gold, so he could take off by stepping on his right foot with his left.
6 jars left.
After what just happened, Nami's heart was even more expectant about what these magical jars could yield.
Smash! Smash! Smash!
This time, the impatient Nami directly chose a triple smash. Just as she looked on excitedly, she was silenced by what came out of the jars.
Kokoyashi Village oranges. Note, ordinary oranges, delicious. Celestial Dragon's glass dome. Note, wear it, and you'll be the silliest kid on the street.
Cracked wooden sword. Note, a training sword used by a swordsman in his infancy, now damaged. Nami, with a blank face, picked up the very familiar orange. She peeled it and ate it, tasting it carefully, and the speechlessness in her eyes grew thicker.
Sure enough, weren't these the oranges from her family's orange grove? Could something like this also enter a 100,000 berries jar?
Xia Wen looked at the 3 useless items, but he wasn't too surprised. It was normal for ordinary jars to yield trash. Someone like Nami, who got the rumble fruit on her first try, was already considered to be blessed with great luck. It was like she hit the big pity breaker directly with one pull, and the rest needed to be slowly repaid. This was the so-called law of
conservation of luck. Again. I don't believe I can't get anything good.
Nami, unwilling to admit defeat, let out a soft humph. She had just used the wrong posture when smashing the jars, which was why she got these ordinary items.
Bang bang. 2 more punches.
This time, Nami's force was noticeably much heavier.
North Blue Map? Postpartum care for sows?
Nami's face was lined with black as she looked at what came out of the 2 jars. She couldn't help but turn to glance at the shop owner, whose expression was normal, as if he had expected it. She didn't understand why such a high-end, magical jar would yield such trash. "You have 1 last jar left for this week," Xia Wen reminded her.
I know.
Nami's mouth twitched. She felt that her plan to target and defeat Arlong might have to be postponed for a week. It was truly because she hadn't managed to get anything good that she had in mind.
Nami sighed, recalling the first jar she opened. She casually threw the 10th jar onto the floor. Smash! From the broken jar, a blue halo burst forth. Chapter 6, The Beginner Period is over. This is
Nami looked at the unusual light, her face lighting up with joy, realizing she had gotten a good item.
But when the light faded, there was only a strange scroll. It's not a weapon, and what is ninjutsu?
Nami picked up the scroll in confusion, looking at the shop owner for help. Chidori, optimized version, a series of lightning release ninjutsu modified by a Chunibyo youth from a world where chakra is dominant. Due to the difference in worldviews, it has been automatically optimized into a skill that can be used by consuming stamina, and its power has been enhanced. It includes Chidori, Chidori Stream, Chidori Sharp Spear, Chidori Blade, and Chidori Senbon, 5 optimized ninjutsu.
After opening the scroll, you can learn it directly. Can only be used once, remark Amaterasu. Ha? Xia Wen raised an eyebrow, a little surprised. These 5 Chidori
techniques are for close-range piercing and cutting, large-scale lightning attacks and defense, respectively.
Long-range lightning spear projection, imbuing swords with lightning attributes, and transforming Chidori into countless fine needles for area of effect strikes.
It could be said that this set of combat techniques is very comprehensive. Especially for Nami, who possesses the Rumble fruit. After learning these 5 moves, she should be able to make some progress in developing her Rumble fruit. And with the blessing and cooperation of the Rumble fruit, the consumption will be greatly reduced.
Shop owner, is this something that can improve my combat power?
Nami eagerly pointed to the scroll in her hand, looking at Xia Wen and asking. Xia Wen nodded, confirming Nami's guess. Yes, this is indeed an item that can directly enhance your combat power, and it can also link with your Rumble fruit.
I have to say, guest, your luck is really good. As for what this thing is, you'll understand once you open the scroll. Really? Nami brightened, immediately opening the peculiar scroll.
Just like absorbing fighting experience earlier, she instantly learned these 5 powerful lightning attribute skills. Nami felt the 5 new skills in her mind, and her tense heart suddenly relaxed.
This time, she was secure.
She suppressed the urge to test her new abilities on the spot and bowed solemnly to Xia Wen.
Shop owner, thank you very much. Thank you for persuading me to buy the jars earlier. Thank you for allowing me to find a miracle of destiny. And become a devil fruit user.
If it weren't for the shop owner's mysterious little shop.
Nami knew she could only gather 100 million berries and then exchange it for her freedom from Arlong. Everyone in Kokoyashi village would have to suffer for at least another year.
Xia Wen, seeing that all the beginner jars were sold out, reclined back in his lounge chair, shaking his head gently. You don't
have to thank me, you opened the jars yourself. I just provided an opportunity for you to change your destiny. If you really want to thank me.
Xia Wen chuckled softly, then strive to become a strong person on the sea, and help me promote my little shop. I hope to see people on the sea no longer setting sail for a vague grand treasure, but rather, setting sail to come to my shop, to buy jars and change their destiny.
He wanted to start a great jar opening era. Nami was startled, softly repeating Xia Wen's words. Letting people choose to set sail to change their own destiny. Miracle of destiny.
Nami hadn't expected that the shop owner, with such miraculous means, would actually be willing to give her, and everyone in the world, an opportunity.
The shop owner's goal was actually so noble and great.
I, Nami, will definitely become a strong person on the sea, and then spread your deeds, shop owner. To encourage more people who are dissatisfied with their destiny to come to your shop to buy jars. Nami's eyes were incredibly serious. She would make this her second motivation after getting her revenge. While adventuring on the sea and drawing maps, she would also help the shop owner promote his shop. Watching Nami, who had accidentally been swayed by him, leave with reverence. Xia Wen twitched his lips, looking at the notification that had just popped up from the system.
Ding!
Congratulations to the host for successfully selling 10 jars and exiting the beginner phase.
Ding!
From now on, the number of jars you can receive will greatly increase.
Ding!
Beginner phase ended, system space has been activated, allowing storage of items opened from jars and other items.
The next benefit will be unlocked after the new shop is unlocked.
On the table, which had been empty, 10 new jars immediately appeared. And the shop became a bit larger, with a display cabinet full of jars appearing behind the lounge chair. So this is the true nature of the myriad worlds. Jar system. Xia Wen was startled, then nodded in realization. The 10 jars he initially received were probably just a test. He looked at the items Nami had just opened in the system space. With a thought, the white light ball and the Chidori scroll appeared out of thin air in his hand.
Absorb, branch 16. Captain Nezumi squinted his eyes, quietly listening to his subordinate's exaggerated report. You're saying, you just spoke a little loudly, and that shop owner broke your shin? That's right. The marine officer, leaning on a cane, nodded cooperatively. That shop owner is not a villager of Kokoyashi village, but an outsider. And in one day, he built a house to sell, jars for 100,000 berries each? At this point, Captain Nezumi could barely keep a straight face. 100,000 berries for a broken clay jar, who would buy that? This outsider must be crazy. But his existence was indeed a threat, likely to expose his dealings with those fishmen. If the other party had a transponder snail, or even new marines from other places. Captain Nezumi narrowed his eyes, thinking of an idea to test him. He planned to send someone to Arlong Park to inform his partner. There's an outsider in the village who built a mysterious shop. And that officer under him, Nami, frequently visits that shop. She's suspected of making large purchases. This way, if that outsider really had a problem, Arlong could deal with it. If he was just a minor character, easily dealt with by Arlong, then everyone would be happy. As a marine, using others to kill and secretly backstabbing is what I should do. However, that cat burglar should have accumulated quite a lot of berries by now, right? A hint of undisguised greed appeared in Captain Nezumi's eyes. Money is a good thing. Chapter 7 Nami's First Battle Arlong Park. Cha-ha-ha-ha-ha. The humans' resistance yesterday was truly amusing. But in the face of absolute power, all resistance is futile. The tall fishman, with a long, sharp nose, sat grandly in a chair, enjoying the flattery and praise of his subordinates. And dark red sun symbol was visible on his open chest. As the captain of the Arlong pirates, Arlong believed that fishmen were naturally stronger than humans. Therefore, he could oppress and exploit those ignorant villagers at will. Boss. That marine said he had important news to report to you. A fishman rushed in. Arlong raised his eyebrows, an impatient expression on his face. What did that greedy and cowardly partner want with him? Boss, today an outsider opened a new shop in the village. That marine saw Nami entering and exiting that mysterious shop multiple times. An outsider? And Nami, that cat burglar, was acting up again? Korubi, go give Nami a warning. Tell her to stop with her little tricks. Arlong grinned, revealing his jagged teeth, and laughed loudly. As long as she honestly gathers 100 million berries, I will mercifully grant Kokoyashi village its freedom. Sha-ha-ha-ha-ha. In reality, he had no intention of letting Nami and Kokoyashi village go. Not to mention Nami's talent for drawing sea charts, which would be of great help to him in conquering the world in the future. And Kokoyashi village, being such a rich place, allowed him to collect high protection fees every month. Plus, his partner, Captain Nezumi, helped cover things up. Therefore, how could he possibly give up this cake for a mere 100 million berries? Korubi, with his two small braids, nodded very seriously. I will warn her, Arlong. As an officer who frequently observed and monitored Nami, he was already accustomed to such matters. Arlong watched Korubi's departing figure, completely disregarding the so-called outsider. He was just a weak human. What kind of trouble could he cause? He was a great pirate who had returned from the Grand Line. In this weak East Blue, no one was his match. As for Nami, let's talk about it when she accumulates 100 million berries. Only money was the most reliable thing. On the other side, Nami, who had just finished opening jars, was in a joyful mood, humming a song softly. She walked towards her home, carrying a bulging backpack. Too bad, everyone can only buy 10 jars within 7 days. Nami thought regretfully. Otherwise, she would have wanted to stay in the shop and open 100 jars, directly becoming a powerhouse capable of dominating the seas. Just as Nami was about to reach home,
a tall figure suddenly blocked her path.
Cat burglar. Kurubi's deep voice came. The boss told me to remind you, don't have any crooked thoughts. Once you gather 100 million berries, you will naturally get what you want. Kurubi stood a few meters away from Nami, very alert.
Although with his strength, he could take her down with just one punch. As a master of fishman karate at 40 Dan, he had that confidence. Nami looked at the tall fishman in front of her, her heart sinking.
Sure enough, Arlong had found out about her visit to the shop. However, from the looks of it, those fishmen and marines were temporarily unaware of the shop's magical nature.
Just as she was about to make an excuse, as usual, to deal with the situation,
the sharp-eyed Kurubi's gaze fell on Nami's bulging backpack. He instantly remembered the shop opened by that outsider. Could this cat burglar have bought some weapons from that outsider? If they were powerful firearms or bombs, he couldn't defend against them. Kurubi's eyes sharpened, and his expression grew colder. What's in your bag? Don't forget your identity. As an officer of the Arlong pirates, you should proactively provide information about that outsider. He stretched out his hand and said forcefully, now, hand over the bag to me, and I might even put in a good word for you in front of the boss, officer.
Put in a good word? Nami bit her lip, and the long-suppressed hatred and anger in her heart instantly leaked out a bit. When they used to order her around without giving her any reward, why?
Didn't they mention she was an officer?
If it were before, she could only force a smile and painfully hand over everything. But now, she was a devil fruit user, and she had mastered powerful lightning abilities.
She would no longer cower and constantly give in.
If she didn't even dare to strike at an officer of the Arlong pirates, how could she challenge the even stronger Arlong in the future?
Chidori. Zzzzz. Squeak.
It was as if thousands of birds were screeching simultaneously. Nami's lowered right hand instantly emitted a dazzling ball of blue electric light, with intense currents constantly shooting out and flashing.
What? What is this? Kurubi was startled by this sudden scene and took half a step back.
The piercing noise made his scalp tingle, and what shocked him even more was the lightning in Nami's hand. When had Nami gained such power? In the instant he was stunned, Nami had already dashed in front of him, her right hand, wreathed in lightning, thrusting towards his abdomen.
Kurubi, relying on years of combat instinct and reaction speed, barely dodged Nami's first attack.
Then he quickly retreated, putting a significant distance between himself and Nami.
After glancing at the scorch marks on his waist, caused by the stray currents, Kurubi's face completely sank.
After Nami came into contact with the outsider, she gained the power to generate lightning.
The answer was obvious then. Nami, you ate a devil fruit and became a devil fruit user?
Having followed Arlong from the Grand Line to the East Blue, he clearly knew how terrifying and troublesome devil fruit users were.
However, Nami had clearly just eaten the devil fruit. She wasn't skilled enough yet. Just as Kurubi was about to retreat and go back to tell Arlong about Nami's changes and betrayal, a deep voice rang out from Nami's mouth, Chidori Sharp Spear. In an instant, a bright lightning spear, moving at a speed difficult for the naked eye to catch, came directly in front of Kurubi and exploded with a bang. The violent current instantly engulfed him. The horror in Kurubi's eyes had not yet faded.
Then his eyes rolled back, and he lost consciousness. Looking at Kurubi, charred all over, lying heavily on the ground, unconscious.
Nami's action of just having condensed a second lightning spear paused, a hint of surprise flashing in her eyes. No, she won just like that?
With just one move, that fishman officer, who had always oppressed her, monitored her, and was so powerful as to be despair-inducing, had fallen just like that?
Is this what power feels like? As expected of the legendary devil fruit. Chapter 8 The Unexpected Guest. After a brief moment of ecstasy, Nami quickly calmed down.
She knew very well that this was just the beginning. The real challenge was Arlong, who was entrenched in Arlong Park. Looking at Kurubi, who was severely injured and unconscious on the ground, she hesitated for a moment, but eventually dragged him by the arm. With great effort, she dragged the tall fishman towards a nearby abandoned house. This was to delay Arlong and the other fishmen from discovering him.
Phew! So heavy.
It's a good thing I got the combat mastery orb earlier, which increased my strength, otherwise I would have had to leave him on the road.
Nami complained softly while finding several thick ropes to securely tie up the unconscious Kurubi.
She did this partly because she couldn't bring herself to take another person's life yet. On the other hand, she was worried that if she killed Kurubi, an enraged Arlong might do something she couldn't predict. What she needed to do now was to quickly settle her sister and then focus on confronting the Arlong pirates. Having made up her mind, Nami quickly turned and hurried home.
Nami?
Nojiko, who had returned from the tangerine orchard, saw her sister's hurried figure and finally breathed a sigh of relief. It's good that you're all right. There was thunder and strange hissing. Outside just now, I was worried something had happened.
Yes, I'm fine. Nami pursed her lips, determined to confess. Sister, listen to me first, just today.
Nami quickly told Nojiko everything, about the jar shop, the power she had gained, and how she had just defeated an officer. After listening, Nojiko was completely stunned, her eyes filled with bewilderment.
Opening jars can make you stronger?
If Nami hadn't raised her hand to display the dazzling blue electricity, she wouldn't have believed that her sister truly possessed such power. So, sister, you should go to Genzo's place to take shelter now. Nami's eyes were bright, and her tone was exceptionally firm. I will definitely defeat Arlong and drive the Arlong pirates out of the village.
Nami. Nojiko's gaze was extremely complex.
Her lips moved, the words of dissuasion that were on the tip of her tongue ultimately turned into concern and support. Be careful, I'll be waiting for you to come back. Meanwhile, Xia Wen, who was about to close his shop, welcomed two new guests.
Hey! Shop owner. I heard you sell jars for 100,000 berries each here?
Is that true or false? A man in blue clothes shouted at the top of his lungs.
Exactly. Hurry up and show them to us so we can see.
I've never seen such expensive jars before, another man in green clothes also clamored. Xia Wen looked at the two men in front of him, dressed like typical bounty hunters, with extremely loud voices. A hint of thought flashed in his eyes. He felt that these two looked somewhat familiar. Especially their appearance, which looked a bit fierce.
Like the kind of cannon fodder villains you see everywhere.
This bounty target really knows how to run. It made us run out of supplies.
Tell me about it.
But being able to see jars worth 100,000 berries is worth the trip. The two, echoing each other, came to the table and casually tried to pick up the jars.
Joseph and Johnny exchanged glances, both noticing the problem with the jars. With their strength, capable of hunting bounties worth 1,000,000 berries, they couldn't even budge this clay jar?
They had originally just taken on a normal bounty and were preparing to get some supplies halfway through. They unexpectedly arrived at this place called Kokoyashi Village. As soon as they entered the village, they both sensed that the atmosphere here was a bit strange.
So they headed straight for the tavern to gather information.
It just so happened that a villager mentioned that a strange jar shop had recently opened in the village. A clay jar selling for 100,000 berries, it was clearly a scam.
Out of curiosity and a desire to see the excitement, they decided to investigate. As it turned out, this shop owner really seemed to have some skill. Are the two guests looking to buy jars? Xia Wen asked calmly. Of course we want to buy. We are Joseph, the sword god, and Johnny, the sword saint. That's right. Joseph and Johnny both puffed out their chests, saying proudly.
But their voices clearly trembled a bit, exposing the fact that they were just bluffing.
Sword god, sword saint? A hint of understanding flashed in Xia Wen's eyes, so it was these two. Zoro's fanboys, Luffy's unofficial crew members, the comedic duo responsible for early humor and atmosphere in the original story. They also participated in the battle with the Arlong pirates when Luffy and the others went to Kokoyashi Village. One jar costs 100,000 berries. You pay first, then open the jar. Anything can come out of it. If you're lucky, you might even directly obtain powerful abilities.
Given that these two were the less intelligent type, Xia Wen chose the simplest way to introduce it.
How amazing! Incredible! The two cooperatively showed expressions of astonishment.
But immediately after, once they finished shouting, they awkwardly looked at each other, neither making the first move to open a jar.
Xia Wen, ? What's wrong? Was his explanation of the rules not detailed enough? Shop owner, we don't have any berries.
The money we have is for supplies, we can't afford the jars.
Joseph and Johnny huddled together, trembling as they looked at the expressionless Xia Wen. This shop owner wouldn't hit them just because they couldn't afford the jars, would he?
In their years as bounty hunters, they had seen many powerful individuals with strange quirks. Don't worry, this shop never forces anyone to buy or sell. Whether to buy or not is the guest's freedom. Xia Wen's tone was normal, but his words subtly shifted. However, just before you two arrived, a guest just opened a devil fruit and became a devil fruit user. And today, I only have these last 10 jars left.
What? You can get devil fruits. What? You became a devil fruit user for 100,000 berries?
The two were instantly dumbfounded, looking as if their jaws were about to drop. Having wandered the East Blue for so many years, they had, of course, heard the legends of devil fruit users. If they could eat a devil fruit, why would they bother diligently taking on million-belly bounties? They could directly capture Grand Line pirates worth tens of millions, and getting rich overnight wouldn't even be a dream.
Joseph and Johnny exchanged glances, instantly reaching a consensus. Supplies? Forget about them. Mission? Abandon it. This kind of high-stakes opportunity absolutely couldn't be missed. If they really could get something good, they could even call their big brother Zoro to come along. The two rummaged through their entire bodies and finally scraped together 400,000 berries, half of which was loose change. Shop owner. We want to buy 4 jars. A smart choice.
Xia Wen's lips curved slightly, and he waved his hand, sending 4 jars in front of the two. Watching them once again stunned by this move, Xia Wen felt as if he could already see his new shop beckoning to him.
Free promotional tools have arrived, haven't they? Moreover, they were related to Zoro, which could attract this main character group member,
bringing him one step closer to unlocking advanced jars.
Chapter 9 Boss, aren't you going to lose money?
You first. No, you first. Xia Wen tapped the table with his finger, exasperated by the two men's constant excuses and polite deference.
Although opening jars is all about luck, you can also open them together. Joseph and Johnny paused, then instinctively looked at the 4 jars in front of them. Then one of us opens one, and we open the last 2 together. That's what I was thinking too.
Jiahaha, X2 Joseph was the first to strike what he considered a very cool pose, yelling loudly as he punched the nearest jar. Sword God Fist. The jar shattered with a clang. A cylindrical object fell out, making Xia Wen's eyes instantly turn peculiar. RPG 7, a classic among classics, comes with 10 rounds of ammunition.
Note, single shot, aimable, powerful, it's a sniper.
Good heavens, he actually got this thing.
What's this?
Joseph curiously picked up the long green tube, examining it from all angles with a bewildered expression.
There are 10 conical heads on the ground too.
I get it, this must be a large caliber flintlock pistol.
Johnny slapped his head, confidently declaring. Xia Wen confirmed his statement, this is called an RPG. It's not wrong to think of it as a large caliber flintlock pistol. However, its power is immense. One shot can blow up a wooden house.
It can even penetrate several centimeters of steel plate. It's a great weapon.
That powerful. Unbelievable, unbelievable.
After hearing the shop owner's words, Joseph and Johnny instantly became incredibly excited, jumping up and down.
With this, whatever we can definitely become the second strongest bounty hunters in the East Blue.
Zoro, our big brother, will surely be surprised then.
Joseph casually tucked the 10 spare rounds from the ground into his waistband.
This action made Xia Wen's
eyelids twitch. My turn.
This jar is so amazing, 100,000 berries is totally worth it.
Johnny shouted excitedly. With a bang, his jar was also opened. A dark-colored drink, without any label or brand, rolled out. Cola, just an ordinary bottle of cola note, guess why there's no label?
Xia Wen glanced at it and said, "It's a drink, no special effects."
I recommend drinking it all at once. Ha! Johnny, full of anticipation, was struck as if by lightning. His excitement instantly froze, replaced by tears and an extremely sorrowful look. Wasn't this supposed to be a liquid devil fruit? Joseph also joined in, clutching his head and crying bitterly. 100,000 berries just gone. Oh no! We're going to go bankrupt.
The two men's wails exploded within the shop.
Xia Wen.
If he hadn't received professional training, he probably would have been unable to resist silencing the two physically.
Their voices were too loud.
If they ate a devil fruit that amplified sound, these two would at least be supernova level in the future.
There are still 2 jars. Maybe you can find your own miracle.
Seeing that the two intended to continue their wailing, Xia Wen immediately spoke up to remind them.
Oh. We still have 2 jars. Joseph and Johnny instantly dropped their sorrowful expressions.
Taking a deep breath, they looked at the third jar with extreme nervousness.
Then, bang!
From the shattered jar, a white orb of light burst forth.
Meanwhile, Joseph and Johnny began to blame each other. Why did you go first? We were supposed to open it together. It's your own fault for being a step too slow, can you blame me? Xia Wen ignored the 2 good-natured clowns and looked at the white orb of light.
Mastery of cooking, this is a body of knowledge and experience in cooking and culinary arts.
After use, you will become a top chef. Note, when traveling, the person you absolutely cannot offend is the chef. Another reward similar to a passive talent? Could it be that white orbs of light represent various basic skill masteries?
Xia Wen pondered, explaining to himself, this is a reward that, once absorbed, can make you a top chef.
Whoever wants this ability, just press it to your chest to integrate it. After hearing him, the two, still shifting blame, both pinched their chins. You can actually get such useful skills from these jars, boss, how do you make them? A chef, huh? That's good, this way we can cook for ourselves from now on.
Finally, Johnny stepped forward and carefully pressed the orb of light to his chest.
When he opened his eyes, a deep shock was visible within them. It actually allowed me to master such powerful cooking skills directly? I can open a restaurant right now.
The miraculous nature of these jars once again exceeded his imagination. Joseph, meanwhile, grabbed his companion's hand, and together they smashed the last jar. A glimmer of green light emerged from the jar.
This different effect from before made the two pause, looking curiously at the red and white sphere.
Pokemon Ball, Pokeball from a world centered around Pokemon. After being transformed by the system, it can be used to forcibly capture sea beasts and small sea kings.
Don't be too harsh on them, or they will get angry. Note, Pokemon without a yellow electric mouse are not authentic.
Boss/shop owner, what is this? X2 Xia Wen smiled faintly, this is called a Pokeball. It can forcibly capture sea beasts or small sea kings.
Once successfully captured, you can command and control them to a certain extent. But don't be too extreme.
Although there are no Pokemon in the world of Pirate King, those unwanted sea kings that don't feel pain make up for it.
Can be controlled. You can actually capture sea kings. But it's so small, won't a sea king be squeezed inside?
Joseph's eyes nearly popped out as he carefully examined the small Pokeball in his hand.
Even small sea kings are hundreds of meters in size. Enough to overturn pirate ships.
If they successfully capture a sea beast, they won't even need to take a ship anymore.
Is this really something that 100,000 berries can get? Boss, won't you lose money? Yes, boss. You're simply the most generous person we've ever met. Joseph and Johnny cheered excitedly.
They only spent 400,000 berries and got so many good things.
They made a huge profit this time. Arlong Park. Why is Korubi taking so long?
Arlong, on his throne, grew anxious, his fingers tapping forcefully on the armrest.
The atmosphere in the entire hall gradually became oppressive.
Except for Hachan and Chu, two officers, the other fishmen didn't even dare to breathe heavily, nervously watching their leader's increasingly grim face. Just then, Arlong's transponder snail suddenly stirred.
Burubaru.
Arlong impatiently pulled out the receiver. Immediately, the voice of his greedy, cowardly partner came through. Arlong, my men saw Nami heading towards you alone.
Chapter 10, The Arlong Pirates era ends, time to go out. Nami is walking towards Arlong Park?
Arlong's eyes were terrifyingly dark, filled with brutality and killing intent.
He sent Karubi to warn Nami, but now Nami appeared safe and sound, while Karubi was nowhere to be seen. This could only mean one thing. That outsider and Nami had teamed up to attack Karubi. Shoo! Go to Kokoyashi village and find Karubi.
Arlong's saw-like teeth gnashed. If you can't find him, then capture Nami's older sister.
I understand, Arlong.
A fishman with a very strange mouth nodded in response.
I gave you a chance, Nami. Since you chose to betray me, don't blame me for being merciless.
Arlong sneered inwardly.
Finally arrived.
Nami stopped in front of the gates of Arlong Park, her gaze firm and bright. After instantly defeating Karubi, she had a clear understanding of her own strength. Now, she definitely possessed the combat power of a great pirate with a bounty of tens of millions of berries. Moreover, she had Logia's elementalization, which ignored physical attacks, making her a natural counter to brainless brutes like Arlong. So, this time Nami didn't choose to sneak in, but walked openly towards Arlong Park. She arrived at this place that had made her despair and sink for 7 years. Glancing at the two fishmen lackeys guarding the gate, Nami's eyes were cold, and she walked straight through the entrance. She was completely different from the timid cat burglar she used to be. This aura and change intimidated the two fishmen guards. They didn't even dare to say a word to stop her, allowing Nami to enter Arlong Park. Before the two fishmen could even breathe a sigh of relief, a blue electric current instantly shot out from Nami's body. Ugh ah ah ah. The fishman guards didn't last even a second before they collapsed, charred black and unconscious. Boom! ZZZZT. Wherever Nami passed, all the fishmen were struck down by the scattered electric snakes. Her gaze was locked on the tall fishman on the throne. 7 years of humiliation and hatred ignited completely at this moment. She wanted revenge for the villagers who had been oppressed and exploited for 7 years. Revenge for Belmere, for her mother.
Arlong, in a furious rage, also saw Nami entering the park.
And the fishman comrades lying at her feet. Arlong smashed the armrest with a punch, his roar echoing throughout the park. Nami!
You damned human thief!
How dare you betray me? I'll tear you to shreds! Arlong raised his saw-like greatsword, Kirabachi, and charged at Nami.
Just a mere thief.
Since that outsider hadn't shown up, he would first deal with Nami, the traitor, to vent his anger. But Nami merely glanced at Arlong indifferently, just as the saw-like greatsword was about to strike her.
Lightning flash. Nami instantly transformed into a dazzling beam of electricity, flash ing into the midst of the other fishmen.
She slowly spread her hands, Chidori stream.
ZZZZT. A dense
electric net instantly spread out, transforming into countless wildly dancing lightning snakes.
Ah ah ah.
The fishmen who hadn't reacted were instantly engulfed by the current, screaming and twitching as they collapsed. The fishmen behind them froze, their faces filled with terror as they tried to escape.
But they still couldn't avoid the wide-range electric net attack.
Even Hachi, who wielded 6 swords and was a bit slower to react, was struck by Nami, who was covered in electricity and moving at extreme speed, receiving a charred chest and falling straight down.
Elementalization? This is impossible. Arlong's pupils constricted, staring in disbelief at Nami, who had transformed into lightning. And his constantly falling comrades, even Officer Hachi was defeated with a single blow. This power, is it a devil fruit? And a Logia devil fruit at that. Even in the Grand Line, possessing a Logia devil fruit was an invincible existence. How did Nami, a thief with no background, get such a precious devil fruit? Could it be?
Arlong suddenly remembered the outsider who had set up a strange shop. And what Captain Nezumi had said, that Nami had apparently made a purchase in the shop. You damned thief, you actually used my 100 million berries to buy this devil fruit.
Arlong roared. He didn't care about any outsiders, he only cared that his money was gone.
As for Nami's current displayed strength surpassing his, Arlong wasn't worried in the slightest. As a fishman, his greatest advantage was fighting in water.
And Nami, as a devil fruit user, wouldn't dare to go into the water.
Nami, who had easily dealt with the last few fishmen, heard Arlong's roar and was suddenly startled.
Your berries? ZZZZT.
Screech. The piercing cry of birds sounded again. Nami, her face covered in frost, walked towards Arlong, who had fled into the water, preparing to escape. Although she had always held the naive belief that if she gathered 100 million berries, she would be free. But, when she used to hide alone in corners, licking her wounds, she had not been without doubt about whether Arlong would keep his promise and truly spare the village. It was just that she was too weak back then. Aside from wishful thinking and gambling on Arlong's credibility, she had no other options. But now, she already had the power to crush him.
100 million berries? Freedom? You never intended to let me go, or to let Kokoyashi village go. Right, Arlong? Rumble.
The sky above Arlong Park suddenly became overcast, with countless silvery lightning bolts streaking across it.
Thunderclap Chidori sharp spear.
Nami reached out and grabbed at the empty air, as if grasping 10,000 thunders, and the dazzling electric light rapidly converged. It condensed into a pale lightning spear, which Nami hurled with force.
The lightning spear tore through the air, instantly piercing Arlong's chest.
The wound was charred black, with not a single drop of blood flowing out. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky gathered again under Nami's will. A scorching and dazzling golden lightning bolt struck down towards Arlong, who was already severely wounded. Nami didn't know why, but she felt as if she was naturally suited to this fighting style.
Weather lightning strike. Ugh ah ah ah.
Arlong, charred all over, widened his eyes, his gaze still filled with shock and confusion. He couldn't understand why Nami, having just eaten the devil fruit, could develop it to such an extent.
This was completely different from the devil fruit user he knew.
Finally, Arlong lost consciousness in the water, his proudest domain.
At the same time, after the two lively characters, Sword God Joseph and Sword Saint Johnny, left joyfully,
Xia Wen pushed open the shop door, truly stepping into the world of the Pirate King for the first time. He looked deeply in the direction of Arlong Park. Then he took a deep breath, feeling the slightly salty sea breeze, the warm sunlight
of Kokoyashi village, and the faint scent of oranges in the wind.
He had only one goal for this outing, to go to Marine Branch 16 and discuss a big business with Captain Nezumi.
ZZZZT.
Xia Wen's body transformed into dazzling blue electric light, his form gradually elongating. Like a bolt of lightning, he flew rapidly towards Marine Branch 16. Thunder rumbled, echoing across the sky.
He didn't know if it was due to the system's provision.
Xia Wen felt that his rumble fruit ability seemed much stronger than Nami's, who had just eaten it.
At the very least, he could now create lightning beasts and continuously fly by transforming into lightning.
At this moment, at the entrance of Marine Branch 16, Captain Nezumi was pacing back and forth anxiously, occasionally wiping the cold sweat from his forehead.
His subordinates had seen Nami single-handedly break into Arlong Park.
This defiance of common sense made him feel particularly uneasy and worried.
Suddenly, boom!
A clap of thunder roared, and dazzling electric light condensed into a human figure before him.
Chapter 11 Appeal to Naval Headquarters.
Captain Nezumi, startled by Xia Wen's appearance, subconsciously shouted, "Who are you?"
"Catch him for me."
The surrounding Marines were about to step forward when they saw a dazzling electric light flash in the newcomer's eyes.
Sizzle! A violent current instantly erupted, transforming into several ferocious, roaring thunder beasts. They surrounded the entire area.
Some new recruits were so frightened their legs went weak, and they collapsed onto the ground.
"I surrender."
"Sir, please don't kill me, it was the captain who made us do it."
"Put down your guns, nobody move."
Two officers shouted almost simultaneously, afraid that some clueless subordinate would anger this mysterious expert. And the adjutant who had previously visited the jar shop, now leaning on a cane, buried his head low, wishing he could crawl into a crack in the ground.
If he had known
earlier that this shop owner had such strength, he wouldn't have dared to extort him even if it killed him.
A devil fruit user. Captain Nezumi looked surprised and uncertain. He couldn't understand. Why would an expert of this caliber appear in the East Blue?
Even at Marineford, a devil fruit user would at least start as a Marineford captain.
How could such a big shot condescend to come to this small Kokoyashi village?
Xia Wen looked down at the trembling Captain Nezumi and spoke calmly. Are you Captain Nezumi, who colluded with pirates?
I can give you a chance to live, and even to earn merit. Thank you, sir. Captain Nezumi forced an ingratiating smile. What do you need me to do, sir?
I promise to obey your orders.
Xia Wen nodded calmly. Good, those who know current affairs often live longer. You should have a way to contact Marineford directly, right? Ah. Captain Nezumi was stunned, then quickly nodded. Yes. As the highest-ranking officer of Branch 16, I have a transponder snail that can directly contact Marineford.
Captain Nezumi cautiously glanced at Xia Wen and said fawningly, I can give you that transponder snail right now, and I swear I will not reveal anything about you. If you have anything in the East Blue, I can help you cover it up, so Marineford won't find out. After speaking, Captain Nezumi secretly breathed a sigh of relief. In his opinion, this big shot, who was likely from the Grand Line, must be planning something big and needed a local like him to cover it up. And covering up others' crimes, as well as framing and slandering, was his old specialty.
Cover up?
Xia Wen's mouth curved slightly, revealing a meaningful smile. No need.
You will now report to Marineford, say that in your jurisdiction, a merchant selling devil fruits has appeared.
And the Arlong pirates, who were originally entrenched around Kokoyashi village, were defeated by one of that merchant's customers.
What? Selling devil fruits? And Arlong, his partner, lost? Captain Nezumi's eyes widened. He quickly recalled the cat burglar's transformation.
So this mysterious expert was the jar shop merchant his adjutant spoke of.
The cat burglar. Nami most likely got a devil fruit by buying jars.
It's possible to get a devil fruit for 100,000 berries. If this news gets out, the entire sea will go crazy.
But this expert isn't worried at all? He even actively asked him to report to Marineford? Doesn't he fear the great pirates active in the Grand Line? Speaking of which, could he also open jars and become a noble devil fruit user?
A hint of greed flashed in Captain Nezumi's eyes. Money was good.
But power would make him even more money. This is your only value. Start contacting them now. What to say and what not to say. I believe you understand this principle.
Xia Wen lightly extended a fingertip, and a dangerous lightning constantly flickered.
Yes. I'll contact them right away. Captain Nezumi flinched and hastily pulled out a special transponder snail. Burubaru. After the call connected, he took a deep breath and said in as calm a voice as possible, This is East Blue Branch 16, I am Captain Nezumi. I have top-level urgent intelligence that needs to be reported immediately to a senior officer at Marineford. After a few seconds, a lazy voice came from the transponder snail. East Blue?
What kind of urgent intelligence could there be in a place like that? Just say it.
If the intelligence is really urgent, I will report it to Vice Admiral Anigumo.
Feeling Xia Wen's almost tangible gaze beside him,
and hearing the transponder snail's careless tone, Captain Nezumi felt his forehead veins throbbing. What's wrong with the East Blue? Don't look down on the East Blue, you bastard.
He suppressed his anger and reported with a slight tremor in his voice, In Kokoyashi village within my jurisdiction, a merchant selling devil fruits has appeared.
The fishman Arlong, originally with a bounty of
20 million berries, was defeated by a villager who purchased a devil fruit.
Captain Nezumi swallowed and added, The Arlong pirates have been completely annihilated. The other end of the transponder snail suddenly fell silent. Immediately after, an incredulous roar exploded. What did you say?
Xia Wen glanced at the stiff, forced-smiling Captain Nezumi, let out a soft scoff, and with a flash of lightning around him, instantly vanished without a trace. The initial bait had been cast. Now, it remained to be seen how many famous characters could be fished in.
It really is easier using the method of a deviant cultivator.
Instead of slowly accumulating popularity and repeat customers, Xia Wen chose to forcibly advertise. No matter how Marineford responded, or whether they believed it or not, Marineford would at least send people to Kokoyashi village to investigate. Isn't this much better than him just being confined to Kokoyashi village, passively waiting for people to come to him? Also, Joseph and Johnny, I must urge them to leave quickly and trick Zoro into coming over. Nami looked at Arlong, who had sunk to the bottom of the water, unconscious, her expression conflicted. She didn't know how to salvage him.
And also,
Nami looked speechlessly at the very large sea beast Mumu in front of her.
This sea cow was very gluttonous, she couldn't afford to feed it. But to just kill it seemed a bit much, didn't it? Moo.
Seeing Mumu with teary eyes, an expression of begging for mercy,
Nami helplessly covered her forehead. After defeating Arlong, most of her anger had subsided. Those fishmen she had stunned would also receive their due punishment.
Just then, a nervous yet familiar shout came from outside Arlong Park. Nami!
Nami, are you there? Are you okay? Chapter 12 The Freedom of Koko West Village. Nami, are you alright?
Genzo, the sheriff of Kokoyashi village, rushed into Arlong Park with several villagers, looking panicked. He was then stunned. By the sight before him, the ground was covered with charred, unconscious fishmen. As Genzo, who had watched Nami grow up, he now looked dazed. He had once led people to resist the Arlong pirates, but they couldn't even handle a single officer. And now, this girl Nami could single-handedly destroy the Arlong pirates.
Genzo? And everyone? Nami looked at the familiar faces from the village with some surprise.
Especially the two bounty hunters she hadn't seen before, and a fishman covered in burns, looking incredibly miserable.
That was Chu, an officer of the Arlong pirates. Nami's pupils contracted, and she felt a pang of fear. It turned out that he had already gone to the village before she arrived. It seemed she was still not cautious enough. After defeating Arlong, she hadn't carefully counted the number of key officers. But why was he so badly injured, as if he had been hit by a bomb? Nami-chan, these fishmen, they won't collect protection money from us anymore, right?
A villager swallowed hard, carefully stepping around the charred corpses on the ground, afraid of accidentally waking them up. The other villagers also looked on with anticipation.
Nami's eyes curved into a brilliant smile. Yes. The Arlong pirates will never bully us again, starting today. Kokoyashi village and everyone are free.
After confirming the news of victory, immense joy and a sense of liberation instantly swept over everyone.
This is great. Nami-chan is amazing. The village finally doesn't have to pay protection money anymore. My dear husband, do you see this?
Genzo was so excited he wanted to rush back immediately and tell everyone in the village this wonderful news. But before that, they had to work hard to tie up all these unconscious fishmen and lock them in the cells of Arlong Park.
As everyone started to get busy, Nami couldn't help but point at Chu on the ground and ask, Genzo, was this fishman beaten like this in the village? If it were an ordinary fishman, Nami wouldn't be so surprised. But Chu, like Karubi and Hachi, whom she had knocked down with one punch, was an officer of the Arlong pirates. Ha ha ha.
Of course, he was dealt with by our invincible sword god Joseph and sword Saint Johnny. Joseph and Johnny, who had finally found their chance, laughed triumphantly. After opening their jars, the two of them went straight to the tavern, ready to show off. While boasting to everyone, the two accidentally triggered the switch of this large blunderbuss. They directly fired the projectile. With a deafening explosion, they, terrified, quickly ran out to check. They found this fishman already blown to this state. Nami, after hearing the whole story, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It turned out that these two foreign bounty hunters were also guests of the mysterious shop owner. However, Nami glanced at the green blunderbuss carefully carried on the blue-clothed man's back. A hint of smugness flashed in her heart. She had opened a devil fruit.
Just then, Johnny suddenly pointed at Mumu, who was trembling in the water, and shouted excitedly, "Ha! There's an unwanted sea beast here." Joseph, quickly catch it with a pokeball. Hee hee ha. There really is an evil sea king, look at my pokeball. Under the incredulous gaze of Nami and the villagers, that enormous sea beast Mumu, large enough to destroy a village, was actually sucked into a small red and white ball with a whoosh. What kind of magic is this? As if noticing everyone's shock, Joseph proudly shook the pokeball in his hand. This is the super invincible sword godball I got from the boss's jar shop for 100,000 berries. We spent all our savings on this, you know. Coincidentally, a villager who had been deterred by the price of the jars exclaimed, "What? So that shop owner wasn't a fraud. If only I had known." Ugh, never mind, I don't even have 100,000 berries, jars again. Genzo, who was quietly working, suddenly remembered Nojiko saying that Nami had obtained the power to defeat Arlong from that suddenly appearing jar shop. Now, these two bounty hunters, who unexpectedly helped the village, also got good things. Perhaps when he saved enough money, he should also go and open a jar. As the village sheriff, he couldn't let himself be outdone by the younger generation. The news of the Arlong pirates' defeat quickly spread throughout Kokoyashi village. Villagers rushed out of their homes, embracing and weeping, spontaneously preparing a grand celebration feast. The scent of oranges, delicious food, singing, and dancing filled every corner of the village. Joy from the bottom of their hearts radiated from everyone's faces, and the gloom of 7 years was swept away. Nami. Nojiko, with her short blue hair, was the first to rush to her sister, hugging her tightly. "Ha, I told you I'd come back, didn't I?" Nami chuckled, hugging her sister back, quietly listening to her share her joy. Even though she had personally annihilated the Arlong pirates and defeated Arlong, Nami still felt a sense of unreality. Just before, she was merely a cat burglar being hunted by pirates after a failed theft. But due to an accident, she coincidentally entered that jar shop. Under the shop owner's guidance, she opened a jar. She became a powerful devil fruit user, defeated strong enemies, and saved her hometown. Even her dream of drawing a world map finally had a chance to come true. Miracle of destiny, Nami murmured to herself, having already made up her mind. Once the village settled down, she would go out to sea as a bounty hunter. While drawing maps, she would also help the shop owner promote, allowing more people to go to the jar shop and change their destiny. Tomorrow, I'll take my sister to open jars, Nami thought expectantly. Marineford. The operator in the communication room, after receiving the report from Captain Nezumi of Marine Branch 16 in the East Blue, did not truly believe this incredibly absurd. Intelligence. How precious are devil fruits, even in the Grand Line, not everyone has one. At auctions in Sabaody Archipelago, a devil fruit is enough to be a highlight item. And now someone is saying that in the East Blue, known as the weakest sea, someone is openly selling devil fruits? What is he after? Does he think the people of the East Blue are weak enough, or inexperienced enough, that he specifically went there to help the poor? Never mind, let's send people from other branches in the East Blue to Kokoyashi Village in Branch 16 to check. It will also be convenient for receiving and escorting the defeated Arlong pirates. The operator casually noted down this intelligence, planning to report it to Fleet Admiral Sengoku after verification. As for who to send, the operator suddenly thought of a very suitable candidate. That was the former Marine Headquarters Colonel, the powerful Logia smoke fruit user, White Chase Smoker, stationed in Log Town. With this illustrious Marine officer, even if there really was a merchant selling devil fruits, he could easily handle it. Chapter 13 3 Visits to the Jar Shop. The next day, early morning. After a night of revelry, most of Kokoyashi Village's residents were still asleep, and the streets were exceptionally quiet. Nami, however, had woken up early and dragged her older sister, Nojiko, to the front of the jar shop. Is this the magical shop? Nojiko curiously surveyed the seemingly ordinary small shop. It was hard to imagine that this was the place that had changed her sister's fate and saved the entire village. Yes, I'll be leaving the village soon, and I'm worried about your safety and the village's safety, sister.
Nami's expression was exceptionally serious. So, sister, you also have to open 10 jars today. If Genzo hadn't felt too embarrassed and firmly refused her kind offer to lend him 1 million berries, Nami would have wanted to drag him along too. After all, a single person can only open 10 jars within 7 days, and the earlier they open them, the better.
Open 10, that's 1 million berries. Nojiko repeated, feeling a little pained.
But last night, she had already supported Nami in going out to sea to fulfill her dreams.
If she didn't have enough power to protect the village, Nami definitely wouldn't leave.
She didn't want to hold her sister back or make her worry.
Don't worry.
Nami patted her chest confidently.
It's only 1 million berries. Once I become a bounty hunter, I can earn that much by just taking on any bounty. Humph. Nojiko snorted in dissatisfaction and, adopting the air of an older sister, began to lecture. Being a bounty hunter is too dangerous.
Nami, remember, don't specifically hunt pirates just for bounties.
Even if you're strong now, the sea is so vast, there are always stronger people out there.
I know, just relax, sister. I'm the most timid cat burglar after all.
Nami replied with a chuckle.
She, of course, knew that her current strength was not enough to roam the seas freely. After all, she hadn't encountered any other devil fruit users yet and didn't know the combat level of other devil fruit users.
But in the East Blue, she could still walk around as she pleased, right?
Gazing at the wooden door in front of her, even though it was her third time coming to the jar shop, Nami felt a faint sense of awe. She took a deep breath and slowly pushed open the door of this mysterious shop. Watching her sister, who had been full of confidence just a second ago, become so cautious, Nojiko also couldn't help but get nervous, thinking there were strict rules inside the shop, and quickly followed obediently behind her sister.
Oh. It's you, the very lucky guest. Welcome.
Xia Wen leisurely sat in his reclining chair, holding a newspaper, and spoke without lifting his head, his tone as calm as water.
Good morning, shop owner. Hearing that he didn't even remember her name, Nami immediately felt a bit deflated. She had clearly introduced herself last time, hadn't she?
Just as Nami was about to get straight to the point and buy 10 jars, she suddenly noticed something amiss.
Is this room a bit bigger than yesterday?
And that display cabinet full of jars at the back, it definitely wasn't there yesterday. Moreover, when she came yesterday, there were only 10 jars, but today there were so many all of a sudden.
Did the shop owner upgrade the shop overnight? Nami thought in surprise. Hello, shop owner, I am Nami's sister, Nojiko, and this is my money for opening jars. Nojiko gently pursed her lips. With trembling hands, she counted out 1 million berries and neatly placed them on the counter.
This was the first time she had ever handled so much money.
Hello, new guest, welcome to my jar shop. Xia Wen finally put down his newspaper and looked up at her. You can choose 10 jars.
The contents of the jars are completely random, anything is possible to open. Xia Wen had a thought, and the display cabinet behind him instantly opened, revealing dozens of pottery jars quietly arranged inside.
He was quite lenient and polite towards guests who paid for jars. Just those few, and these ones on the table.
Nojiko quickly selected 10 jars, watching in surprise as they flew to her under the shop owner's control, landing neatly on the counter. And the 1 million berries, at some point, had been collected by the shop owner.
Shop owner. Nojiko suddenly thought of something and asked somewhat nervously, if I open an item or ability suitable for my sister, can I give it to her? Compared to the already safe village, she was more worried about Nami, who was about to venture out. If her sister could get a boost before leaving, that would be excellent. Sister!
Nami exclaimed in surprise, looking worriedly at the calm-faced shop owner.
She quickly whispered, trying to dissuade her, we agreed today was for you to open jars.
Xia Wen chuckled, no matter, as long as payment is made, ownership of the jar belongs to you. Aside from the 2 rules that they must be opened inside the shop and that all sales are final, any physical items opened can be freely gifted or sold.
As for other rules, I'll add them when I think of them. It can really be traded and given away? Nami was stunned, and couldn't help but look at the mysterious shop owner, who always remained calm and composed.
With a confirmed answer, Nojiko's lips curled into a slight smile, and while her sister was in a daze, she quickly smashed the first jar.
Crack! A delicate revolver and an ammunition box fell out, making Nojiko's eyes light up. This kind of weapon was very suitable for Nami.
Revolver, 6-round capacity, comes with 100 bullets, a product of modern military industry. Note, a rather ordinary revolver. Xia Wen casually glanced at it, a well-crafted revolver.
Crack! Another jar was smashed. A flash of green light appeared. This time, it was still a physical item.
But it looked like some kind of wood, an item with strange carvings and patterns.
Nami looked suspicious, feeling that this thing seemed a bit eerie.
Harvest totem I, once placed, it can affect land within a 1-kilometer radius, increasing its yield by 100%. No side effects, no activation required, no power source needed, plug and play. Collect 3 harvest totems I to synthesize a higher level harvest totem 2, increasing the affected range tenfold and the effect to 300%. Note, with it, people will never have to worry about going hungry again.
Xia Wen was silent for a moment, then explained in his usual tone, this is a special totem. Its sole purpose is to make the land within a 1-kilometer radius fruitful, doubling its yield. So it's a life support item. Nami looked away, somewhat disappointed.
She only cared about things that could make people stronger.
Nojiko, on the other hand, carefully put away the totem with a look of joy. Unlike Nami, who often went out, she had to manage the entire tangerine grove.
After witnessing the magic of the jars and getting a taste of success, Nojiko no longer hesitated or felt reserved, opening 5 jars in one go.
Crack! 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 Crisp breaking sounds rang out one after another.
When the 5th jar shattered, under Nami and Nojiko's expectant and nervous gazes, a blue light finally appeared.
Chapter 14 Junyen, the rat colonel who got a beating. A blue light. It must be a very powerful ability. Nami was even more excited than Nojiko, who was opening the jars, and couldn't help but cheer. After the blue light dissipated, a black, metallic-looking scale lay quietly in the broken jar.
Emperor's Will, a high-risk spell from a certain dragon race world, sequence number 89, representing extreme high temperature and explosion. After system optimization, no dragon language chant is required, no bloodline requirements, and only stamina is consumed. However, a 1 to 3 second charge-up is still required when casting, and movement is impossible during the charge-up.
Note, anyone can play with fire. He actually got a spell.
Xia Wen's eyebrows twitched slightly.
However, Emperor's Will's position was somewhat awkward. It wasn't as good as those above it, and those below it were just a so-so. In most cases, it could only be used as a human-shaped high-explosive grenade. But in the East Blue, where devil fruit users were relatively rare, and where most pirates couldn't withstand gunfire and cannon fire, Emperor's Will's threat level was still quite high.
Xia Wen calmly explained, this scale comes from a dragon race, and it's imprinted with a power called Emperor's Will.
Emperor's Will, code 89.
After charging, it can unleash an explosive attack comparable to a normal cannonball. Its temperature is very high, enough to melt steel, making it a good offensive method.
You can master it directly by placing the scale on your forehead. Melt steel. Power comparable to a cannonball.
Nami's eyes lit up after hearing this, and she excitedly grabbed Nojiko's hand. Sister,
this ability is perfect for you. With it, I'll feel much safer when I go out to sea.
I'll try my best.
Nojiko no longer mentioned giving it to her sister.
She carefully placed the scale on her forehead as the shop owner instructed. Instantly, a large amount of information about Emperor's Will and its usage techniques flooded her mind, causing her to close her eyes and concentrate. Seeing her sister receiving the inheritance, Nami curiously turned to Xia Wen. Shop owner, you just said
dragon race? Are there really dragons in this world?
In her impression, dragons were large animals that stole princesses, breathed fire everywhere, and were very greedy. However, she had never seen one, nor had she heard of any dragon race appearing anywhere. It was as if these powerful creatures only existed in storybooks imagined by people. There's no dragon race, but there are dragons. Xia Wen thought of a certain leader of the Revolutionary Army, and Kaido, who had eaten the mythical Zoan Azure dragon form, and chuckled softly. Of course, there are still dragons in this world. Not only that, but there are also devils and angels. They are all top-tier existences on the Grand Line. Whether it's Haki or devil fruit ability, they have all been trained and developed to a very high level.
Not only dragons, but also devils and angels? Nami felt her eyes starting to spin. So there were so many races on the Grand Line? However, a familiar word the shop owner just said caught Nami's attention: Haki.
Yesterday, before she opened the jars for the first time, the shop owner had equated Haki with the legendary devil fruit. That meant, to become a strong person renowned throughout the Grand Line, one must have Haki.
Nami couldn't help but ask, "Shop owner, what exactly is Haki?" Xia Wen, who had intended to let Nami understand some essential knowledge, gave a general explanation. Haki is divided into three types: observation Haki, armament Haki, and
Conqueror's Haki, which only those with the potential of a king can awaken. The reason Haki can be on par with devil fruit is because it can resist and even suppress devil fruit abilities. Even Logia devil fruit users' elementalization cannot be immune to armament Haki attacks. In the latter half of the Grand Line, anyone who can't use Haki can't be considered strong. To put it bluntly, in the New World, everyone knows Haki. As for the more advanced armament Haki, there was no need to tell Nami about it. So, devil fruit isn't the strongest power,
Nami said, feeling a little down. 3 types of Haki. Can resist devil fruit abilities. Ignores elementalization.
Every piece of information challenged her understanding, making her feel profoundly small. At this moment, Nojiko, who had successfully learned Emperor's Will, woke up and looked at her sister with confusion.
Before she could continue opening jars,
the shop door suddenly opened, and a figure appeared that made both sisters glare at him simultaneously. It was Captain Nezumi, who had colluded with Arlong to oppress Kokoyashi village.
"Guest, I'm here today." Captain Nezumi rubbed his hands, his face full of nervousness.
He had just received a notification from Marineford, learning that Marineford had dispatched Marine Headquarters Colonel Smoker to escort the Arlong pirates and investigate the mysterious merchant. He was so scared that he immediately ran to curry favor. After all, his previous cooperation with Arlong was no secret. If the Marine Headquarters knew about this,
then he would be finished.
The only person he could rely on now was this mysterious big shot.
"Captain Nezumi, you actually dare to show your face?"
Nami's voice was cold, and electric arcs began to flash around her. Seeing that Nami was also in the shop, Captain Nezumi was so scared that he kept backing away. Wait.
"I'm here too," but Nami didn't
give him a chance to speak, nor did she intend to listen to his excuses. She immediately sent him flying with a kick, then punched and kicked the dizzy Captain Nezumi. Nami was, of course, filled with anger and hatred for Captain Nezumi. But she also knew that she couldn't actually kill or cripple Captain Nezumi. Killing a Marine Headquarters colonel would definitely make her a wanted criminal, implicating her sister and everyone in the village. So she didn't use her devil fruit ability, but only used basic close quarters combat to beat the greedy and shameless Captain Nezumi like a punching bag.
Bang! Bang! Pop!
For a time, Captain Nezumi's shrill wails echoed through the shop. As Nami's punching bag workout ended, Captain Nezumi, bruised and swollen, tremblingly forced out a fawning smile. "I'm sorry, Ms. Nami, it's all my fault. I'll go back and donate 1 million berries to Kokoyashi village." At this point, Captain Nezumi's heart was bleeding. Money was everything to him, but compared to his life, spending some money appropriately,
he could still accept it.
Moreover, if he used the berries to repair the village, he might even be able to mend his relationship with the villagers. When the Marine Headquarters arrived, his collusion with pirates should be partially overlooked, right? At worst, he would just bribe the Marine Headquarters colonel with more money then.
Nami sneered, 100 million berries. 1 berry's less, and I'll chop off one of your fingers. What? 100 million berries. Why don't you just rob someone? Captain Nezumi exclaimed in shock, but seeing the blue electric light flickering at Nami's fingertips, he immediately choked. Wasn't this the shop owner's power? Could it be? Captain Nezumi, who had suffered a great loss, could only keep smiling apologetically. I'll find a way to raise this money as soon as possible. Xia Wen, who had silently watched the farce, seemed to remember something and said, I forgot to mention, fighting between guests is prohibited in this shop. This time is an exception, but remember not to hit people in the shop in the future. Guests who violate the rules might be blacklisted by me. I promise it won't happen again next time. Nami immediately promised. Only then did Xia Wen look at Captain Nezumi, who was grimacing in pain and sprawled on the ground. Tell me, what news did you receive? Captain Nezumi felt as if he had been granted a great pardon. He endured the pain, stood up, and said, Shop owner, news came from Marineford that a Marine headquarters colonel will arrive at Kokoyashi village within 2 days. Finally, he's coming? Xia Wen's spirits lifted. Which Marine headquarters colonel? It seems to be Marine headquarters Colonel Smoker, who oversees Log Town. He will lead a team to apprehend the members of the Arlong pirates. Smoker? That Smoker who couldn't beat anyone in the early stages and couldn't beat anyone in the later stages? This was an old acquaintance from the original story. Xia Wen's lips curved slightly. If it were anyone else, or a vice admiral with less screen time, he would only be able to sell jars normally and then wait for the Marine high-ups' reaction. But if Smoker came, his progress in unlocking advanced jars could increase by 1 more point. Chapter 15. The Toolman's journey begins. After reporting, Captain Nezumi slinked away. Before leaving, he stared at the magical jars on the table with an incredibly eager and greedy gaze. If it weren't for Nami, that jinx, being here today, he would definitely have tried to buy a jar. Of course, this was also because he wanted to be wary of Nami and Nojiko, these two outsiders. He didn't want others to know what trump card he might open. He had to find a time when no one was around to secretly open jars. Humph. Nami watched coldly as Captain Nezumi, who kept looking back, walked away. When she turned around, a sweet smile had returned to her face. All right, let's continue. Opening jars. Big sis, you still have 3 jars left to open. Nojiko nodded lightly, her gaze falling on the last 3 jars. Having no strong obsession with becoming stronger, she didn't bother with any sense of ritual and simply smashed them with a decisive swing of her hand. Bang! Bang! The first 2 jars only yielded 1 liter of fresh water and a fishing rod, clearly useless junk. When the last jar shattered, the familiar green light glowed again. A crudely cut paper figure appeared in their line of sight. Paper substitute. When suffering fatal damage, it can be activated autonomously to evade that damage. Can only be used on oneself. Note, there was once a person who cut paper figures all night to escape pursuit. After reading the content and note identified by the system, Xia Wen's eye twitched. Good. Even the lord of a certain two-faced character is making a cameo. Shop owner, what is this? A paper figure cut by a child? But the craftsmanship is too shoddy. Nami picked up the thin paper figure, handed it to her sister with a strange expression, and looked at Xia Wen in confusion. This thing, it deserves a green light? Xia Wen explained unhurriedly, paper substitute, a one-time item. When suffering fatal damage, the item can be activated autonomously to evade that damage. A very practical life-saving trump card, but it can only be used on oneself. Life-saving item. Evade fatal damage. Nojiko's eyes lit up upon hearing this, and she immediately stuffed the paper figure back into Nami's hand without a word. Nami, you must take this. When you're out and about in the future, if you miss home, just look at this paper figure. Nojiko paused, seemingly feeling that her words might be ambiguous, and quickly added, but don't be reluctant to use it when you need to. We can always open more jars when you come back. Nami held the paper substitute that her sister had forced back into her hand, feeling a sting in her eyes. She didn't refuse, but solemnly put away the paper figure and nodded vigorously. I will.
She had already decided that as soon as the Arlong pirates were apprehended by the arriving Marines, she would set sail immediately. She would make a big name for herself in the East Blue, promoting the jar shop everywhere. As for how to make a name, of course, she would ask those pirates to help her out.
After Nami and Nojiko, the two sisters, left. Xia Wen looked at the rewards already prepared in the system space.
Without any hesitation, he placed the scale imprinted with Monarch's flame on his forehead. After going through a basic process, Xia Wen successfully learned Spirit of Words, Monarch's Flame. As for the paper substitute, he kept it in the system space, where it could still be triggered autonomously.
And the other items?
Xia Wen looked at the junk in the space, feeling that it wouldn't be long before he could set up a display cabinet to sell those useless items. Now, there are still 76 jars left until the new shop unlocks. Xia Wen sat in the shop, beginning to calculate how many more jars he could sell in a short amount of time.
When Smoker arrives at Kokoyashi village.
To verify the authenticity of the jar shop, he will definitely choose to open 10 jars.
If Toshiji is also there, that's 20 jars. As for Captain Nezumi,
Xia Wen would tentatively count him for 10 slots as well.
So, in the short term, that's 30 jars. If Joseph and Johnny go back and find Zoro, then bring him to open jars. That would be 16 plus 10 is equal to 26 jars. Hiss.
Looking at it this way, the task of 100 jars will be completed very soon. Xia Wen was very satisfied with the current progress. And once Smoker confirms the authenticity of his jar shop,
it will definitely cause a stir in Marineford. Unlocking the new shop will be a piece of cake. Where will the system choose for the new shop, in the afternoon? Joseph and Johnny, finally awake from their hangover and resupplied with the help of the villagers, arrived at the dock. Joseph carried his large blunderbuss with high spirits, while Johnny held the pokeball containing Mumu. They boarded their small boat, waving goodbye to the villagers who had come to see them off. Kahahaha. Thank you for the fine wine and tangerines.
From now on, if anyone posts a bounty, just leave it to us, Blade God Joseph and Sword Saint Johnny. As bounty hunters, they wouldn't stay in one place but would constantly move forward. Suddenly, Joseph spotted the figure standing alone under a tree and immediately shouted excitedly, "Boss! Johnny and I are leaving now. We'll definitely be back in a few days to open the rest of the jars." Johnny also laughed loudly, "That's right. Once we find Big Brother Zoro, we'll definitely come back to patronize the boss's shop." Xia Wen looked at the two tools, so self-motivated and full of enthusiasm. He showed a faint smile. To ensure he could truly lure Zoro, he decided to offer a great promise. "I welcome any guest who wishes to change themselves and comes to buy jars. You can go back and tell Zoro that my jars can not only open up great-grade swords but also secret manuals that will allow him to break through the iron-cutting realm." These words were like the fiercest fuel, completely igniting their fighting spirit. Having known Zoro for so long, they naturally understood Big Brother Zoro's desires and pursuits. "Don't worry, boss. We will definitely find Big Brother Zoro." The two set sail from the port, carrying the mission of finding their big brother. That's it for today. Meet you in next part.